when a battle-hardened SEAL commander walked into the armory and saw a quiet female soldier carefully cleaning a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle, he almost dismissed her as just another support recruit. But moments later, her record revealed something no one expected. This ordinary woman had more confirmed kills than half his unit combined. What followed stunned the entire base, and forever changed the way they looked at her. The morning sun rose over the sprawling military base, painting long shadows across the desert sands. The air was already thick with heat, and the rhythmic sound of boots striking the ground echoed from the training fields. Inside the fortified compound, every corner hummed with discipline, the constant reminder that here, weakness had no place, and hesitation could cost lives. Among the elite SEALs stationed at this base was Commander Jack Reynolds, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the wire fences. Broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, Jack was a battle-hardened leader with scars that told stories no words ever could. He had led countless missions, often deep in hostile territory, and he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen the worst of humanity and returned to tell about it. To his men, his word was law, and to outsiders, his presence was intimidating. Jack had one ironclad rule: every soldier under his command must prove themselves in the field before they earn his trust. This was why he was wary of Sergeant Emily Carter, a recent addition to the unit. Emily was different from the men who filled his barracks. She was quiet, modest, and to most eyes, unassuming, with her small frame, calm demeanor, and habit of fading into the background. She did not fit the rough, larger-than-life image of a combat sniper. Rumors swirled the day she arrived. Some soldiers scoffed at the idea of a woman attached to a CAL unit, especially one armed with the legendary Barrett .50 caliber rifle, the beastly weapon that could tear through vehicles, walls, and targets at over a mile away. Probably logistics, one whispered at Chow. Or just here for show, another muttered, shaking his head. Barrett's bigger than she is, a third chuckled, earning laughter from the table. Emily ignored it all. She had heard such talk before, in every unit she'd ever joined. Words did not bother her, results did. Unlike most who craved recognition, Emily carried no airs of arrogance or bravado. She walked the base with the same steady rhythm as the rest, spoke little, and kept her focus on her responsibilities. To many, she seemed invisible. To Jack Reynolds, however, invisibility was suspicious. He did not dismiss her entirely, but he watched her closely, waiting for her to slip up, waiting for the truth of her capabilities to reveal itself. The base itself was alive with activity. Trucks rumbled in and out, loaded with supplies. The clang of weights and the shouting of drill instructors echoed from the training pits. And within the armory, the heart of the unit's firepower, soldiers meticulously maintained the weapons that gave them the edge in combat. It was here, in this armory lined with racks of rifles, crates of ammunition, and the metallic scent of gun oil, that Emily spent most of her free time. She sat at a small workbench in the corner, her posture calm and focused, as she carefully dismantled and cleaned the Barrett M82A 1.50 caliber sniper rifle. The weapon was massive, nearly 5 feet long, and weighing over 30 pounds, but she handled it with practiced ease. Her fingers moved with precision, each piece cleaned and reassembled as though she were restoring something sacred. To her, the Barrett was not just a weapon. It was a responsibility. Every shot she would take with it, every pull of the trigger, carried the weight of lives, her comrades, her enemies, and sometimes the mission itself. Commander Jack entered the armory one afternoon, his presence instantly commanding attention. Conversations ceased, and soldiers straightened unconsciously at the sight of him. His boots echoed across the floor as his gaze swept the room, sharp and calculating. That was when he noticed her. Emily sat hunched over the Barrett, a cloth in one hand. Her eyes narrowed in concentration as she adjusted the scope's calibration. To Jack, it was an unusual sight. Most rookies hesitated with a weapon of that caliber, fumbling with its weight or overcompensating in their eagerness to prove themselves. But Emily moved with quiet confidence, her motions fluid, precise, and deliberate. Jack's eyes narrowed. Interesting. One of the younger SEALs noticed his gaze and smirked. "Commander, don't worry. She's not about to break it. Probably just likes polishing it for the shine." The remark drew a few chuckles from others nearby, but Jack did not laugh. Instead, he studied Emily more closely. She did not flinch at the comment. She did not look up or defend herself. She simply continued her work, wiping the barrel with smooth, even strokes, then inspecting the bolt assembly with the scrutiny of a craftsman. There was something in her silence that unsettled Jack. Not fear, not insecurity. Something else. He walked over, his shadow falling across the workbench. Emily looked up briefly, her eyes calm, almost indifferent, before lowering them back to the rifle. "That's a big weapon," Jack said evenly, his voice low but carrying authority. "Not many can handle it properly." Emily's hands did not pause. She finished cleaning the scope, set it aside, and finally met his gaze. Her voice was quiet but steady. "It is only as good as the one behind it, sir." For a brief moment, silence hung between them. Jack studied her expression. No arrogance, no smugness, no fear. Just simple conviction. He gave a slight nod, but his mind was already calculating. This woman was not ordinary, and something told him her file contained more than what the gossiping soldiers knew. What Jack did not yet realize was that the woman cleaning the Barrett in silence had already carved her name into military history. She carried a record that would soon silence every doubter on this base, including him. The armory remained quiet after Commander Jack Reynolds spoke to Emily Carter. His words had been simple, a passing comment about the size of the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. Yet the weight behind them carried more than idle curiosity, was a test, subtle but deliberate. And Emily's reply, calm and measured, had unsettled him in a way he had not expected. Jack left the immediate vicinity of her workbench but lingered within the armory. His sharp eyes scanned the racks of rifles and shelves of ammunition, but in truth, his attention never left Emily. She continued working on the Barrett with unwavering focus, her delicate hands moving the heavy parts as though they were nothing more than puzzle pieces. She was methodical, wiping, inspecting, checking alignment, and reassembling with the precision that rivaled the most seasoned armorers. There was no wasted motion, no nervous fumbling. She handled the weapon not with bravado, but with reverence. Several younger SEALs, standing off to the side, exchanged amused glances. To them, the image of a slim, quiet woman tending to a rifle that weighed nearly as much as she did was almost comical. Bet she couldn't fire that thing without it knocking her flat on her back, one whispered, stifling a laugh. Another added, looks good for pictures, though. Maybe that's why they sent her public relations. Their voices carried farther than they realized. Emily heard them, though she gave no reaction. Commander Jack heard them as well, but he said nothing. He wanted to see if she would respond, if she would crack under the weight of mockery. Instead, she simply adjusted the bipod of the Barrett, ensuring it locked firmly into place, then inspected the scope alignment with the patience of a surgeon. Jack's jaw tightened. He had seen countless rookies fold under far less. Most would have turned defensive, snapped back, or attempted to prove themselves right there on the spot. But not Emily. Her silence was not weakness, it was control. Still, Jack could not allow himself to be swayed so easily. Experience had taught him that appearances often deceived. For every soldier who seemed competent on the surface, there were 10 who broke under the pressure of real combat. And combat was the only crucible that mattered. As if to test his growing curiosity, fate provided an opening. Lieutenant Harris, the unit's logistics officer, entered the armory with a clipboard in hand. He was efficient, meticulous, and respected, though not known for wasting time with pleasantries. Spotting Jack, he gave a quick nod before checking off a few boxes on his sheet. Then, glancing toward Emily, he muttered almost absent-mindedly, hard to believe she's back stateside. Heard she racked up over 70 confirmed kills on her last tour. The words slipped out casually, almost like a note of inventory, but they struck Jack like a hammer blow. 70 confirmed kills. He turned his head sharply toward Emily, who was still bent over the rifle. She did not look up, did not even flinch. Her face remained composed, as though the number meant nothing. But Jack knew better. He had spent his career in war zones, and he understood what that statistic meant. Confirmed kills were not handed out easily. Every one had to be verified, documented, and corroborated. Most soldiers never had more than a handful in their entire service. Even the most experienced snipers, legends in their own right, might achieve 20 or 30 over a career. But 70? That was not only extraordinary, it was almost unheard of. The nearby SEALs who had been smirking earlier suddenly fell silent. They had heard Harris's words too. Disbelief flickered across their faces. One of them muttered under his breath, "No way. That's gotta be a mistake." Jack ignored them. He stepped forward, his boots clicking against the floor as he approached Emily once more. His gaze was harder this time, sharper. 70 confirmed kills, he said, his voice low and even, carrying the weight of both skepticism and curiosity. Is that accurate? Emily looked up at him briefly, her eyes calm and steady. She gave a small nod.
Yes, sir.
No elaboration. No boasting. Just simple confirmation. Then she returned her attention to the rifle, adjusting the sling as though the conversation had already ended. Jack studied her for a long moment, searching for any hint of exaggeration, any flicker of pride or arrogance. He found none. He could feel the tension in the room. The younger SEALs exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier laughter evaporating. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Jack spoke again. 70 kills is not something you stumble into, Sergeant. That kind of record. That takes years, and it takes steel. Emily set the Barrett down carefully on the bench, then straightened in her chair. She met his gaze directly, her expression unreadable. I did my job, sir. Nothing more. Her words were delivered with the same steady calm as before. But Jack heard the weight beneath them, the heaviness of memory. Of battles fought and survived, of lives taken in the name of duty. For the first time, Jack felt something shift inside him. It was not trust not yet, but it was respect. Respect earned not by words, not by swagger, but by a truth too heavy to fake. He nodded once curtly, then turned to leave the armory. As he reached the door, he glanced back over his shoulder. Emily had already returned to her work, her hands moving over the Barrett with the same calm precision as before. But now, the men who had once scoffed at her no longer laughed. They watched her in silence, the reality of who she was settling over them like a shadow. Jack stepped outside into the blistering sun, his mind turning. This was no ordinary recruit. And soon, he knew her skills would be tested in ways that would silence every doubt once and for all, Commander. Jack Reynolds was not a man easily surprised. In his long career, he had seen new recruits come and go, most claiming to be tougher, stronger, or sharper than they really were. He had also seen veterans whose files looked impressive on paper but whose performance collapsed under the weight of reality. That was why he trusted only what he witnessed firsthand, but Sergeant Emily Carter was different. The casual remark from Lieutenant Harris 70 confirmed kills was not something Jack could ignore. Numbers like that demanded answers that evening. Long after the training grounds had emptied and the sun had dipped below the horizon, Jack sat alone in his office. The dim glow of a desk lamp cast shadows across the stacks of mission reports, personnel files, and intelligence briefings spread before him. He opened Emily's file, flipping past the standard details basic training scores. Marksmanship evaluations, physical fitness reports all, yet nothing extraordinary on the surface. Then he reached the deployment. History his eyes narrowed. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, unnamed operations in classified regions. Each line was accompanied by mission codes, most of them redacted. But what struck Jack were the commendations letters of praise from field commanders, intelligence chiefs, and even Allied Special Forces units. The language was formal but carried weight. Extraordinary precision under fire. Instrumental in neutralizing high-value targets. Saved the lives of dozens of troops with decisive action. Jack leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This was no ordinary sniper. He read further. There it was, buried halfway down the file, 72 confirmed kills, 3 targets eliminated. 1 mission credited with preventing an entire convoy from being ambushed. His hand tightened around the edge of the file. He had operated alongside some of the finest snipers in the world, and even the most celebrated rarely exceeded 30 or 40 confirmed kills. Emily Carter had more than doubled that. The file also noted something curious: prefers silence. does not seek recognition, performs best when underestimated. Jack smirked faintly. Underestimated. That was an understatement. The next morning, he stepped onto the training grounds with fresh eyes. He spotted Emily among the unit, standing quietly at the edge as instructions were given. She blended in effortlessly, neither trying to assert herself nor avoiding attention. It was almost uncanny how invisible she seemed when she chose to be. The men still eyed her with skepticism, though now it was tinged with unease. The number Harris had mentioned the day before lingered in their minds. They whispered among themselves, uncertain whether to believe it. "That's got to be paperwork inflation," one muttered. "No way, she outshot guys who've been in the game for decades," another said. But their voices carried less conviction than before. Jack decided it was time to end the speculation. During the midday briefing, he addressed the unit. His tone was sharp, his presence commanding as always. "We are only as strong as our weakest link. And I don't tolerate weak links." His gaze swept the group before settling on Emily. "Some of you seem to doubt the value of every soldier standing here. Let's clear the air." He motioned toward the training range. "Sergeant Carter, step forward." The men exchanged glances. Some smirked, expecting her to falter under the spotlight. Others folded their arms, curious to see if the rumors held any weight. Emily, without hesitation, stepped out from the line and moved toward the range. Her expression was calm, almost detached, as though none of this surprised her. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle was already set on the bench, its scope glinting in the sunlight. The weapon looked monstrous compared to her slender frame, but she approached it with the familiarity of an old friend. "Targets at 1,200 meters," Jack ordered, his voice even. "Let's see what you can do." The soldiers fell silent. At that distance, even skilled marksmen struggled. Wind, humidity, bullet drop, everything worked against accuracy. Most recruits would miss more often than hit. Emily adjusted the bipod, lowered herself behind the scope, and exhaled. The range grew deathly quiet. Boom, the Barrett roared like thunder, its recoil powerful enough to knock an untrained shooter flat. But Emily absorbed it smoothly, her body braced perfectly. A second later, the distant steel target rang with the unmistakable clang of impact, dead center. Murmurs rippled through the watching soldiers. She fired again. Boom, another perfect hit. Then another. And another. 5 shots. 5 bullseyes. She adjusted the scope slightly. Jack realized with a jolt she was compensating for wind before the spotters even called it out. "Next target," Jack commanded, his voice tighter now. 1,800 meters. Gasps rose from the group. That distance was almost absurd, over a mile away. Even the best struggled to remain consistent at that range. Emily said nothing. She shifted, adjusted, and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett thundered again, and seconds later, the steel plate rang true. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. For the first time, Jack allowed himself a small smile. This wasn't luck. This wasn't staged. This was mastery. When Emily rose from the rifle, she simply stepped back into line, as though nothing unusual had happened. Her face remained composed, her breathing steady. The men looked at her differently now. The smirks were gone. In their place was something else, respect mingled with unease. They had seen talent, but this was something beyond talent. This was precision honed by fire and blood. Jack addressed them firmly. 70 confirmed kills. 3 high-value targets. That's the record of the soldier standing among you. Some of you doubted her. Some of you mocked her. From this day forward, you'll remember what she's capable of, and you'll remember that skill knows no gender, no size, no appearance. His eyes swept the group, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sergeant Carter is one of the deadliest snipers alive. If she is covering you in the field, you're already safer than you realize. The men stood in silence. No one dared laugh now. Emily lowered her gaze, quietly rejoining the formation. To her, it was just another day, another demonstration of skill she had long since perfected. But for the men of this unit and, for Commander Jack Reynolds, the revelation of her record marked the beginning of a change they would never forget. The training range incident had silenced much of the mockery surrounding Sergeant Emily Carter. Her flawless precision with the Barrett .50 had forced the men to reconsider their assumptions. Still, silence was not the same as acceptance. Though none dared laugh at her anymore, Jack Reynolds could see the lingering doubt in some of their eyes. Sniper skills were one thing, but the SEALs prided themselves on being more than sharpshooters. They were warriors who thrived under grueling conditions, strength, adaptability, and above all, trust in one another under fire. Jack knew respect could not be commanded by words or earned by statistics alone. It had to be forged through trial. And if Emily was to truly belong in his unit, she would have to prove herself in more than marksmanship that morning. Under the blazing sun, Jack gathered the entire platoon on the obstacle course. Dust swirled beneath their boots, the air heavy with heat. "Men," he barked, his deep voice carrying across the yard. "And Sergeant Carter?" He paused just long enough for the faintest ripple of unease to pass through the group. "Yesterday, you witnessed her skill on the range. Impressive, no doubt. But a soldier is not defined by one ability. A SEAL must be capable of more." He gestured toward the course, a punishing gauntlet of walls, ropes, mud pits, and weighted drags. At the far end, a final task awaited, hauling a 200-pound dummy, simulating the rescue of a wounded comrade. "You'll run it in teams of 2, Jack continued. "Endurance, speed, and coordination. No excuses." His gaze swept over them before settling on Emily. "Sergeant Carter, you'll run with me." The men stiffened. Some smirked faintly, confident this would expose her limits. Running side by side with the commander himself was no easy task. Jack was notorious for his relentless pace and near-superhuman endurance. Emily gave no sign of hesitation. She simply nodded.
"Yes, sir."
The whistle blew. Jack exploded forward, his boots hammering the packed dirt, his strides long and powerful. Beside him, Emily kept pace, her movements efficient and measured. The first wall loomed ahead, 8 feet of sheer wood. Jack scaled it effortlessly, swinging his legs over and dropping to the ground below. He glanced back, half expecting her to struggle, but Emily was already over the top, her smaller frame moving with surprising agility. She landed softly beside him, and without a word, they continued. Rope climb, mud crawl, balance beam. One by one, the obstacles fell behind them. Sweat poured down Jack's temples, but he maintained his blistering pace, determined to test her stamina. Emily, to his surprise, never faltered. Her breathing was controlled, her steps steady, her focus unshaken by the halfway point. Murmurs rippled through the watching soldiers. Damn. She's keeping up with the commander. No way she lasts the whole course at that speed. But deep down, they were beginning to doubt their doubts. The second half of the course grew harsher, thick mud pits that clung to boots. Heavy logs to be carried across uneven ground, barbed wire to be crawled beneath. Jack pushed harder, leaping over barriers with raw power, hauling weights with sheer strength. And still, every time he looked beside him, Emily was there, mud-smeared, sweat-soaked, but steady as ever. Finally, they reached the last task, the 200-pound rescue dummy. Many men struggled here, their muscles quivering from fatigue. Jack grasped one end, waiting to see if Emily would falter. Without hesitation, she grabbed the other end. Together, they heaved the heavy weight and began the final drag across the scorching dirt. Jack set a brutal pace, testing not just her strength but her willpower. The dummy's boots carved trenches into the ground as they hauled it inch by inch. Jack's muscles burned, but he kept his expression neutral. He stole glances at Emily. Her face was streaked with sweat and grime, her arms trembling slightly from exertion, but her eyes were locked forward. Unyielding, step by step, they closed the distance. Finally, with a final heave, they dragged the dummy across the finish line. The watching soldiers erupted into cheers and claps of disbelief. They had expected her to stumble, to collapse, to prove herself less than what her file claimed. Instead, she had matched their commander stride for stride. Strength for strength. Jack straightened, chest heaving with exertion, and looked at Emily. She stood tall, despite her exhaustion, refusing to show weakness. For the first time, he addressed her not with skepticism, but with recognition. "You held your ground, Sergeant. Impressive." Emily nodded once, her tone even. "Just doing my duty, sir." But Jack saw more than duty in her performance. He saw grit, determination, the unbreakable steel forged by experience. Few could imagine. The men of the unit shifted uncomfortably. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. She was not just capable, she was exceptional still. Jack knew skill on the course and precision on the range were only pieces of the puzzle. True respect in this brotherhood came on the battlefield, under live fire. When lives hung in the balance, that test was coming sooner than any of them realized. The desert night was alive with whispers. The wind howled across jagged ridges, carrying sand that stung the skin like needles. Beneath the cloak of darkness, Commander Jack Reynolds and his SEAL team crouched low, their silhouettes blending into the terrain. The mission was simple: on paper, infiltrate hostile territory, gather intel on a fortified compound, and extract without detection. But Jack knew nothing was ever simple in enemy lands. The intel had been clear. The enemy had fortified sniper nests, high-caliber machine guns, and patrols scattered throughout the valley. One mistake could turn the mission into a slaughter. Beside him, Sergeant Emily Carter lay prone, her Barrett .50 cal resting steadily on its bipod. Through the scope, her eye was calm, unblinking, as she surveyed the compound a mile away, while the rest of the unit shifted nervously in the dirt. Emily seemed carved from stone, her breathing slow and deliberate. Jack crouched beside her. "What do you see, Sergeant?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but every word carried precision. "Two snipers, East Ridge. Overwatch positions. One heavy machine gun nest at the northern gate. Guard rotations every 90 seconds. If we move on their interval, we can pass unseen unless those snipers catch us." Jack followed her directions through his binoculars. Sure enough, her assessment was flawless. He grunted softly in approval. "She doesn't miss a thing." He gave the hand signal. The unit moved. Silent as shadows, the SEALs descended the ridge, slipping into the valley floor. Emily stayed behind, rifle trained on the enemy positions. Her role was Overwatch Guardian Angel from afar. She had done it 100 times before, and tonight, the lives of her teammates depended on her precision. The first movement was clean. The team slipped past the outer patrols undetected, hugging the shadows of crumbled walls. But as they neared the compound, disaster struck. A spotlight swung unexpectedly across the yard, catching the faint glint of a rifle barrel. An enemy guard shouted, raising his weapon. Alarms erupted through the compound like thunder. "Contact!" Jack barked, his voice sharp and controlled. Chaos exploded. Enemy fighters poured from the compound, rifles blazing. Tracers ripped through the night sky. The SEALs dove for cover, returning fire in short, precise bursts. But they were pinned down. Machine gun fire shredded the walls around them, and the high ground snipers began zeroing in. Jack cursed under his breath. They were caught in a kill zone. Then, the first boom cracked through the night. The thunderous roar of the Barrett echoed across the valley. A half-second later, the Eastern Ridge sniper slumped forward, his rifle clattering against stone. Boom, another shot. The second sniper's head snapped back, body tumbling into the dirt. Emily's voice crackled calmly over the comms. "Ridge clear. Shift focus north." Jack's heart pounded not with fear, but with awe. Under a storm of bullets, her shots were surgical. "Suppress that machine gun," Jack ordered. Boom. The Barrett roared again, and the northern gate nest went silent, its gunner collapsing before he could even swing his weapon toward the SEALs. The team surged forward, seizing the opportunity. But the enemy responded fast, swarming from the compound like hornets. Jack led his men, firing controlled bursts, dropping targets as they pushed deeper. Yet the numbers were overwhelming. "Commander, left flank." Someone shouted. Jack spun just in time to see 3 fighters closing in, rifles raised. He squeezed his trigger too late. Boom. A single Barrett round tore through the darkness, dropping all 3 with one devastating shot. Jack froze for a fraction of a second. That shot had been impossible through shifting shadows, moving targets, and under fire. Yet Emily had made it look effortless. "Eyes up, Commander," her voice came through, calm as ever. For the next brutal minutes, the battle raged. The SEALs moved like water, flowing from cover to cover, pushing closer to their objective. Each time an enemy threatened to overwhelm them, Emily's rifle cracked from afar, eliminating the danger with unerring precision. But then came the moment that would change everything. As the team reached the compound's outer wall, an enemy squad flanked them with an RPG. Jack turned, eyes widening as the launcher locked onto his men. Down, he roared, shoving one soldier aside. The rocket fired. Time slowed. Jack knew there was no way to intercept it in time. Then dash boom. The Barrett thundered louder than ever. Against all odds, Emily's shot split the rocket mid-flight. It detonated in the air, a fireball lighting the night sky. The shockwave rattled the ground, but the SEALs were unharmed. For a moment, silence followed, as though even the battle itself paused to acknowledge what had just happened. Jack exhaled a shaky breath. Good God. The cums crackled again. Emily's voice, steady and almost casual, RPG neutralized. You're clear, sir. The team pushed through the compound, completing the mission with ruthless efficiency. With Emily's overwatch, they eliminated threats before they could even form. By the time the dust settled, the SEALs stood victorious, their objective secured. When they regrouped on the ridge, Jack's men were buzzing with disbelief. Did you see that shot? She split a rocket midair with a Barrett. That wasn't human. Emily approached quietly, slinging the Barrett over her shoulder. Her face was calm, unreadable, as though she hadn't just saved the entire unit. Jack stepped forward, his gaze hard but filled with something nourishing and a touch of humility. Sergeant Carter, he said firmly, his voice carrying over the group, I have served with some of the finest soldiers in the world. I've seen legends, men written about in history books. But tonight, you proved you stand among them. The men fell silent, their eyes fixed on her. No more laughter. No more doubt. Only awe. Emily gave a slight nod. Just doing my job, sir. But Jack shook his head. No. You did far more than that. You saved us. You saved me. And from this day forward, there isn't a man here who doesn't know your worth. The soldiers nodded, some even clapping her on the shoulder as they passed. The quiet woman who once faded into the background now stood as the unit's guardian angel, the sniper who could see farther, strike harder, and remain calmer than anyone else alive that night. As the unit returned to base, Jack caught one last glimpse of Emily. She sat in the armory once again, quietly cleaning her Barrett under the dim lights. But this time, when soldiers walked past, they didn't smirk or scoff. They slowed, nodded with respect, and left in silence. Emily Carter was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable. The base was unusually quiet the morning after the mission. The sun rose in sharp streaks of gold across the training grounds, but the soldiers moved with a different energy. There was a new tension in the air, one of reverence mixed with awe. The events of the night before had left everyone shaken, yet profoundly impressed. Commander Jack Reynolds stood outside the armory, watching his men arrive. Some carried gear with their usual casual swagger, but most moved with a subdued respect. He had called for a unit-wide debrief, and every soldier knew why. This was more than a tactical review, it was a reckoning. A formal acknowledgement of Sergeant Emily Carter's extraordinary capabilities. Emily herself arrived shortly after, walking as she always did, quiet, composed. Her weapon slung over her shoulder. Dust and grime from the mission clung to her uniform, but she appeared unbothered. There was no boastfulness, no desire for praise. She was simply doing what she had always done, her duty. Jack cleared his throat, drawing the eunuch's attention. His usual authoritative tone carried weight, but there was an edge of genuine admiration that had not been there before. "Men," he began, his gaze sweeping across the group. A few eyes darted to Emily, unsure if the moment would be just another lecture. "Last night, we faced one of the most dangerous situations I've encountered in my career. Our mission required precision, calm under pressure, and split-second decisions. And we succeeded because one soldier performed beyond anyone's expectations." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Every head turned toward Emily, some wide-eyed, some filled with lingering disbelief. "Sergeant Emily Carter," Jack continued, his voice firm yet measured, "your actions during the mission were nothing short of extraordinary. You neutralized threats that could have ended multiple lives, including mine, while remaining completely composed. Every shot you fired, every assessment you made, saved this unit." A stunned silence followed. The men of the UNITUF, hardened warriors who had seen countless battles, found themselves looking at her in a way they had never looked at anyone before. Some lowered their heads in respect. Others exchanged glances that mixed awe with humility. Jack's gaze softened as he looked directly at Emily. "I have served alongside legends. Men who were praised in briefings, men who carried medals and histories of glory, and yet, last night, you proved that courage, skill, and precision are not measured by appearances or assumptions. You are one of the finest soldiers I have ever seen." Emily's face remained calm, her expression almost neutral. But Jack noticed the subtle shift in her eyes, the faintest glimmer of acknowledgement. A quiet pride that did not need to be shouted. A few soldiers stepped forward, breaking the silence. First, Lieutenant Harris, who had casually revealed her kill record days before. "Sergeant Carter, I underestimated you. My apologies. You've earned every bit of our respect." Others followed, the apologies and acknowledgments growing, each one a small but meaningful recognition of her prowess and bravery. Jack motioned for the men to stand down, then turned back to Emily. "From this day forward, you are not just a member of this unit. You are a cornerstone of it. Your judgment, your skill, and your courage set a standard for every one of us." Emily nodded, finally allowing herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "I only did what was necessary." Jack smiled faintly, a rare, genuine expression of approval. Necessary. It was heroic. And heroism deserves acknowledgement. Later that day, Emily returned to her quarters, but the atmosphere followed her wherever she went. Soldiers she had trained alongside or been dismissed by now approached her with respect. A man who had once made a derisive comment about her handling the Barrett now quietly said, "Sergeant, that shot, you saved lives. I won't forget it." Even the new recruits who had doubted her abilities watched her from a distance, understanding that she was more than the quiet, unassuming soldier they had initially dismissed. Emily's presence commanded respect not through intimidation or loud words, but through competence, courage, and an unshakable calm. That evening, Jack approached her in the armory. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. She was cleaning her Barrett, methodically as always, but her movements carried a new weight of quiet authority. "Emily," Jack said, his voice low and respectful, "I wanted to make sure you know. Last night wasn't just impressive. It changed the way this unit functions. The men, they see you differently now. I see you differently." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I appreciate that, sir. But I'm just doing my job." Jack shook his head. "No, you did more than your job. You set a standard that will influence every operation, every mission, and every soldier in this unit. That is invaluable." Emily paused for a moment, considering his words, then simply nodded. "Thank you, sir." As Jack left, he realized something significant had happened. Emily's skill, once underestimated, had forced a shift not just in perception, but in culture. The men of the unit had seen firsthand what true mastery, courage, and focus looked like. And in that recognition, Emily had secured her place not as an outsider, but as a core member of the SEAL team by nightfall. The armory was quiet once again, lit only by the dim overhead lights. Emily continued, cleaning her Barrett, each motion precise, unhurried, almost meditative. But now, there was a subtle difference. Every soldier who walked past her glanced with respect, some even offering a nod or quiet acknowledgement. She was no longer invisible. She had earned her place in the hearts and minds of her comrades and, in the eyes of the commander, who had once doubted her in that stillness. It was clear, Emily Carter had not only proven her skill, she had proven that excellence, courage, and quiet determination could command respect without words, without flash, and without ego. And from that day forward, the SEAL unit would operate knowing that in the shadows, watching, protecting, and striking with lethal precision, Emily Carter was there kneeling, unmatched. Unforgettable, the desert dawn brought a sense of quiet victory to the SEAL base. The mission had been completed with precision, the lives of the team secured, and the enemy's stronghold neutralized. Yet beyond the tactical success, something deeper had shifted. Among the dust, sweat, and adrenaline of combat, a new understanding had emerged, one that would resonate far longer than the echoes of gunfire. Sergeant Emily Carter moved through the base that morning with her usual calm demeanor, the Barrett slung casually over her shoulder. Her uniform, streaked with mud and soot from the mission, marked her as battle-tested, but there was no pride in her steps. Only the quiet confidence of someone who had fulfilled her duty. Soldiers stopped to look at her differently now. Young recruits, who had once whispered doubts and exchanged skeptical glances, now regarded her with reverent awe. Experienced SEALs, many of whom had initially dismissed her as inexperienced or fragile, nodded in respect. Emily had earned something far more valuable than recognitions. She had earned trust, not just from her superiors, but from every soldier who would fight beside her in the future. Commander Jack Reynolds, meanwhile, watched from a distance. He leaned against the railing of the barracks, observing the unit with a rare sense of satisfaction. Emily's performance on the mission had left an indelible impression. He had seen many skilled soldiers in his career, some legendary, but few possessed the combination of lethal precision, calm under pressure, and unwavering humility that Emily had displayed. Jack reflected on the moments that had led to this point, the first time he saw her cleaning the Barrett, the disbelief at her kill record, the grueling challenge course where she matched his endurance, and finally, the mission that had proven her to be indispensable. Each memory reinforced the same truth. Emily Carter was extraordinary. Later that day, the unit gathered for a debrief. The atmosphere was different from any previous meeting, where tension or fatigue might have existed. There was now a sense of camaraderie, forged through shared danger and mutual respect. Jack addressed the team with a tone of pride and authority. Yesterday, we faced extreme conditions. Lives were at stake. And one soldier stood out, not because she wanted recognition, but because she was exceptional in every way. His gaze swept the room before settling on Emily. Sergeant Carter. Your skill, courage, and composure under fire saved this team. You set a standard that every one of us will strive to meet. From this day forward, you are not just part of this unit, you are its backbone. Emily nodded modestly. Thank you, sir. I only did what was necessary. Jack smiled faintly, the rare warmth in his expression reflecting genuine admiration. Necessary? No. Heroic, and heroism deserves acknowledgement. The soldiers applauded, some even rising to their feet. There were murmurs of respect, whispers acknowledging that Emily's presence had changed the unit. It was no longer simply a team of soldiers, it was a brotherhood and sisterhood, forged by shared experience and a newfound appreciation for quiet excellence. That evening, Emily returned to the armory, as she often did, to clean her weapons. The Barrett rested in her hands, polished and cared for as meticulously as ever. But there was a subtle difference in the atmosphere. Soldiers who passed by no longer whispered doubts or smirked at her presence. Instead, they offered nods, small gestures of acknowledgement, or simply allowed her space with silent respect. As she worked, Jack entered quietly, standing at the doorway for a moment. He watched her with a sense of profound understanding. Emily, he said softly, you've changed more than this unit. You've changed the way we see skill, courage, and leadership. People will remember this mission, but more importantly, they will remember you, the example you set. Emily looked up briefly, her expression serene. I didn't do it for recognition, sir. I did it because it had to be done. Jack nodded, understanding completely. In that simple statement, he recognized the essence of her character, humility intertwined with unparalleled competence. And yet, you've left an impression that will last far beyond this base. You've set a legacy. Over the following weeks, the unit's dynamics shifted. Emily's leadership qualities began to emerge in small but significant ways. Younger soldiers sought her advice on marksmanship, strategy, and composure under pressure. Veterans turned to her in moments of uncertainty. Her presence became a stabilizing force, a reminder that excellence was not defined by appearances, gender, or history, but by dedication, skill, and quiet confidence. The transformation within the unit was tangible. Missions ran smoother, morale improved, and a new culture of respect and inclusivity took root. Emily's actions had proven that anyone, regardless of how underestimated they might seem, could shape the course of events and earn the admiration of the most seasoned warriors. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack found Emily sitting alone at the edge of the base, the Barrett resting across her lap. He approached silently, observing the calm focus she carried even in moments of respite. "You know," he said quietly, "I've led men through countless missions, faced dangers that would have broken most, and worked with soldiers considered the best in the world. But watching you, it's different. You've taught me something I didn't expect. True strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet. Invisible until the moment it must shine." Emily met his gaze, the faintest smile forming. "Strength is responsibility, sir. And responsibility doesn't need applause." Jack nodded, a mixture of admiration and respect in his eyes. "Well, you've earned it anyway." As he walked away, Emily returned her attention to the Barrett, the steady rhythm of her cleaning almost meditative. Around the base, the soldiers carried a renewed sense of purpose. Knowing that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a living example of courage, skill, and unwavering dedication, Emily Carter's legacy was now cemented. Not just in her kill record, not just in the accolades or recognition, but in the hearts and minds of every SEAL who had the privilege to serve alongside her. She had proven that true greatness comes not from seeking attention, but from performing with excellence when it mattered most. And in the quiet of the armory, with the desert sun fading into night, Emily prepared her Barrett for the next mission. She was ready, as always in scene, precise and unforgettable. The SEAL commander had been stunned by her record, but it was her courage, discipline, and quiet mastery that left a mark far deeper than statistics ever could. She was not just a soldier. She was a legend,